Our guest today is Akosua Annobil, founder of Tech in Ghana. Akosua became an award-winning journalist in her early 20s, interviewing iconic figures like Mary J Blige, Chaka Khan, Boris Johnson, and Craig David. Her career took her to Hollywood, where she worked with BET and was a part of Jay-Z and Beyoncé's entourage during Jay-Z's first performance in Ghana nearly 20 years ago. Despite having no tech experience, she started Tech in Ghana 8 years ago, growing it from a small team into one of the continent's leading conferences. The platform has provided global access and connections for Ghanaian startups in countries like France, the UAE, and South Korea. In her talk, Akosua shares how personal loss and pain have fueled her determination and become her superpower, driving her to build a platform that empowers others. Here is Akosua.
What a difference 1 week can make, because this time last week, I had absolutely no intention of being here today. Like, I wasn't going to come. And if you would have asked me why at the time, I would have made every excuse under the sun. I would have said, I'm too busy, I'm doing a panel upstairs, I need to prepare, I've got a 4-year-old. I would have said anything. And people that know me really well were looking at me as if to say, Akosua, are you serious? Like, we've seen you do a lot more than this. What's your problem? And the truth of the matter was that when I first got asked to do this, I knew immediately what I wanted to talk about, which is the same subject. But as soon as I started working on it, it made me have to dig up some really painful memories. And there was at one point I was speaking to a friend of mine about it, and tears started coming out of my eyes. I was like, oh my God. And then I thought to myself, no, I haven't got time for this. I don't want to get emotional. I need to be focused. I've got work to do. But the truth is, I was just scared, right? I was scared of having to revisit death, losing a loved one, grief, and all the things that come with that. It can really sort of debilitate you. And physically, mentally, spiritually, I felt it was doing that to me again last week. But I'm fine now. I'm good, and I'm here. And I'm not going to cry, okay? So today I want to speak to you about how death and pain became my superpower. On the 14th of June, 2012, my brother rings my phone and he says, I can't get hold of Mum. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's at her house knocking on the door. She lived in a house in East London. He couldn't get hold of her. And this was strange because the day before he'd had a Chinese with her. They were sitting down having a nice time. And I had spoke to her a couple of days before as well. So I started ringing her phone. She wasn't picking up. And I knew immediately that something was wrong. But when my brother called me back to say, oh, Mum's gone, I was like, she's gone where? Where's she gone? I was in denial. It's fine, you can laugh, it's fine. Because it was looking back, it was funny the way I dealt with it. But at the end of the day, the truth was that she had passed away, very suddenly. And of course it was devastating. I was very close to my mum. But I didn't know that was going to be the beginning now of a complete change in my life. Because up till that point, 15 years before, for the whole 15 years, I'd been working in the media industry. I'd got international newspaper journalism at the age of 19, 20. And then I went on to become an award-winning entertainment editor. I was in commercial radio. I was in Hollywood for a little while with BET. Then in my 20s, I started a PR company. That was really cool, entertainment business. I then evolved that into digital communications, event management, and then I started doing a lot of award shows. Some of you in the UK might know the Channel U Awards. Many of you in here would know things like Gooba. I was one of the very first producers on those kinds of shows, so I was on a roll. Now I'm best known for being the founder of Tech in Ghana, which has become one of the leading tech conferences on the continent. But I would never have had the title that I had now had my mum not had passed away. And I'll tell you why. So up to that moment in 2012, when all of this was going on, I just hadn't stopped to look back and say to myself, what have you achieved? What are you really doing? What's your purpose? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And grief makes you do that. Right? My mum's passing made me do that. And I really had to stop and think about what I wanted to do with myself and in the world, because suddenly, press trips, and celebrity interviews, it started to feel a little bit meaningless to me. So I took some time out, and all in all, it took about 18 months of me just like figuring out what I wanted to do. But the beginning of those 18 months was really spent trying to really like get over the loss of my mum. And I remember going on YouTube and reading articles about how you get over the loss of a parent. And I read this one article that said, find the silver lining in your grief. And I thought, but wait, how am I supposed to find something good out of the fact that my mum has died? I didn't get it, but I knew there must have been something in it. So I spent some time, meditated on it a little bit, and I thought about the fact that my mum used to love dressing up. Like, she was a really good dresser. But at one point, she ended up not really going out and buying stuff. So she used to send me to Marks and Spencer, Debenhams, buy me this skirt, buy me this top. And I used to come back like her personal stylist, show her these clothes. I like that one. Change that color, change that size. So I was always up and down for my mum. I loved doing it, but it was time consuming. So I said to myself, maybe my silver lining is that I've got a bit of time back, right? It's a very small thing, but I embraced it. And I thought, okay, well, if you've got a bit of time back, what are you going to do with that time? Because it's essentially, even if it's 2-3 hours a week, that's time that you would have been spending with your mum. So what are you going to do with those few hours a week now? And I found myself starting to like learn about my heritage, reading about Ghana, reading about Africa, and then I just started becoming really obsessed with it, to the point where I was like, nah, I need to figure out how I'm going to use the skill sets that I've got to do something a bit bigger in the world. And then before I knew it, those thoughts became reality. By 2013, I was traveling to Ghana on a regular basis, meeting family, doing some mentorship in places like Mest. I was doing some hosting of events like there was an event called the Angel Fair Africa, which was for investors that look after startups. So I was like, okay, there's a lot going on. By the time 2015 came, I was just inspired to create my own thing, and I started AB 2020, which was initially just a newsletter, a digital newsletter for the Africa business, tech, and investment community. So we just used to write about what was happening in those spaces. Then before I knew it, I was doing little business missions with people from the diaspora into the country. Then I was doing event management services for people. And then eventually along came Tech in Ghana. Because in 2016, when I was going to a lot of tech events, they were mainly focused on Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, bit of Rwanda, but for good reason. But every time they spoke about Ghana, it was like an honorary mention, like, oh, Ghana's doing stuff. And then when I did some research, I realized it's because people didn't know nothing about what was happening in the Ghana tech ecosystem. I was aware that there were startups and founders that were leveraging technology to build local solutions to a lot of problems that were happening here. There was a growth in, tech hubs that were popping up everywhere. Accelerators started coming into the country. Mobile money started really developing. And so I was like, right, that's what I'm going to do. So 2017, in February, I launched Tech in Ghana in London to highlight Ghana's tech community. In the same year, we did it here in Accra. And since then, we've done it every year, twice a year in both places, to the point where now we've got around, I'd say, 25,000 really brilliant tech companies, founders, institutions, regulators, all of that within a network that we've built. And so the irony of that, though, so this is just to give you a bit of an idea of what Tech in Ghana is about. But the irony of all that is I grew up in the complete opposite location to Africa, in a place called the East End, the Isle of Dogs. Any of you that watch EastEnders might be familiar with this picture. So I grew up on the Isle of Dogs, and people know it now as the central business district called Canary Wharf, very fancy. But in the 80s and 90s, you'll know, if you know about the Isle of Dogs, you know what I'm talking about. But don't get me wrong, I liked growing up in a multicultural society. It was very diverse. My household was very UK African. I was the youngest of 6 kids. My parents were very unconventional Ghanaians. And so I really loved it. And now, my friends really laugh about the fact that, Akosua, she's crazy. She could be eating, fufu and light soup 1 second, and the next minute I could be eating, unseasoned pie and mashed potato, and I'm happy. That's who I am, right? So, I've learned now that I think that unique understanding of Ghanaian and British culture is what has helped me today. And so I embrace it. But the only way I was able to embrace it was by taking that time out during my pain to sit down and think about who I am and what I'm about, and really just center myself. And don't get me wrong, in the 12 years since my mum's died, that was not the only tragedy that I've had to deal with. I kid you not, 5 years to the day, the 14th of June 2017, my first nephew, was playing football right here in Accra, fell ill, went into hospital, didn't come out, right? So he passed away. Literally 3 weeks before that, in 2017, I was 6 months pregnant, I lost my child. And then I lost another 2 children after that before having my daughter that I have now. And imagine all the things that happen on top of that as well. Heartbreak, losing friendships, financial problems, all these things. And just a couple of months back, I buried my dad at that tender age of 86. Amazing father, but that's a talk for another day. And that's in with my little daughter there. So my point is, like, tragedy happens, pain happens, you cannot avoid it in life. But I feel that since I stood in my purpose because of pain, I'm better equipped to deal with pain when it comes along again in life. And I've been a little bit more, I think I'm much more careful about the way I move in terms of what I do. And I think that if people, instead of using pain as something that sort of stops you from moving on in life, if you use it instead as a tool to say, do you know what, this somewhere is happening, for some reason it's happening to me, and somewhere there is a blessing in it, right? I think that you can really use it. It helps you to become a bit more understanding, have a little bit more empathy. So all of these things is just what I wanted to share with you. And I'm not sure if there's anyone in this room who's dealing with a loss of a loved one, dealing with pain in any way. I just wanted to share my story to say, look, if you can, find the pain, find the silver lining in it, and turn it into a blessing for yourself. Thank you.